Hi, in today's video I'm going to show you how to get Searxng installed using Podman. In a previous video I showed you how to get Podman set up on nixos, and in this video I'm going to show you how to get Searxng running in a Podman container. So what is Searxng? If I come back across to here, it's a meta search engine that doesn't track you or profile you, and it runs locally. And what you can do is configure it to use multiple different search engines such as Google, Bing, Startpage, DuckDuckGo, Brave, the list goes on, and actually have it running locally on your machine. And if I come across, I'll show you some of the advantages of this. What we have up here is obviously the search box here, and we have different tabs for different categories. So general, images, video, news, IT, files, maps, social media. And what you'll see down here is we also have the ability to download the results both as CSV and a JSON file as well, which can actually be used with Open Web UI, which I'll show you in another video. So what we have is, as you can see here, we have multiple different search providers providing the links, Startpage, Brave, Google, should be with some Bing down here, DuckDuckGo. And the advantage of this is, if I take you across, for example, to Google, I have Google set up to open up in the web tab here. And typically what will happen is it will come up in the all tab. So if I just run nixos, what will happen is quite frequently you'll get a lot of useless stuff in the sidebars, or AI generated stuff here. Now if I have a look at DuckDuckGo, the issue with DuckDuckGo is that which uses Bing search results, I believe, is you don't actually have any pagination, you just have more results. As you can see, the URL isn't changing here. So the issue with DuckDuckGo is that you can't actually have URLs for the different pages you visited, which makes it extremely difficult to bookmark searches and that sort of thing. And if we have a look at Bing, for example, as you can see, as I come across the Bing and it eventually loads, it loads with a load of stuff coming up in the front page. Let's have a search for nixos podman, and we just got all this clutter on the page. You can see how many results we've got down here. And just a load of other clutter on the web page. So the advantage of Searxng is it's a nice clean interface, and what I'll do is actually take you through the preferences to show you how this is sort of set up. So we have the general setting here, user interface, privacy, engine, special queries and cookies, and we can set the search language. I haven't enabled the autocomplete. We can turn safe search off. And then we have, these are the default categories that you can select. So you can set it to actually include multiple results on the main page, instead of just having specific categories. You can have different tabs for different categories, but you can also specify the default categories. We have the user interface, the language, the theme style. You've got options on how this is actually configured. So center alignment, results in new tab, infinite scroll, that sort of thing. You've got the privacy. We got the engine. So what this is you can see here we have general, images, video, news, IT, files, maps, social media, other. And for each of these categories, you can actually enable different search engines to use. And these are the default ones that are selected. And what you'll see is you have sort of wait, max time, reliability. So one's marked in green, 100% and more reliable. So what we have here is sort of science, translate, web, Wikimedia, stuff without further subgrouping, Wikipedia. So that is the general tab. Then we have tabs for the images. So you can actually set it to use Bing Images, Brave Images, Google Images, Quant Start Page, things like Flickr, Wikimedia. Where was it? There was a Wikimedia one here somewhere. Public domain archive images. So this will actually pull in images from all these search engines at once. Then we've got videos, so like YouTube, Bing, Brave, Google Videos, Dailymotion, Piped, Vimeo, Wiki Commons Video. We've got news, so this is where it's going to pull the news stuff from. Bing News, Brave, Google News. IT, so this is things like Docker Hub, Stack Overflow, GitHub, ArchWiki, Gentoo. And then we have files, and what this will do is actually search various file sharing sites, Kickass, Pirate Bay. We've got maps, so this will search for stuff on OpenStreetMaps. We've got social media, so this will search using these sites here. And then we've got other. We have special queries, which I haven't looked to, and cookies. So if I just come back to the main page up here. So this is the start page, basically. And what you can also do is if I click, where is it? There's a way to actually, let me see. There's actually a way where you can click on one part of this and get it to be a default engine for Firefox. So if I just search for Firefox, I think, give it a second. Okay, there we go, Firefox. So we have Firefox, we have suggestions, the response time, we have the search URL, and we can download the results. So let's have a look at how we can actually get this set up. So these are my notes, which are in this file here about setting up Podman rootless on nixos. And what we're going to be doing is actually setting up 4 different files. So if I come across to the settings down here, what you see is we've got 4 different files. We have a compose.yaml, a limiter.toml, a script called Searxng start, and settings.yaml. So let's go through these one by one. So the compose.yaml file is the file that we would use with the podman-compose up-d option. And what this does is this actually starts up Podman. And what you'll see here is these services. We have Redis. It's going to create the container name. It's going to use this image, run this command. We have the network. So we're creating a network called Searxng. The volumes, these options called cap drop. Let me just check. And then we have the Searxng container here. And what this is doing is it's actually listening on port 8080. So you need port 8080 open in your firewall for this to actually work. And this is something that you will actually need to change. You can see this volume section here. So you'll see home, username, podman, Searxng, and that corresponds to this directory containing these files. So what you need to do is actually create a directory called something like podman, and another subdirectory called Searxng, and this is where we would actually put the files. So what you'll see down here is we have the Searxng base URL, so that's localhost 8080. This is the important one, Searxng secret equals Searxng secret. If you follow along in the documentation for Searxng, what it will suggest is that you edit the settings file, and in that file there is a section called secret key, and it will ask you to run a command to generate a secret key to add to that file. The issue with that is that means that you can't upload that particular file to somewhere like GitHub, because it will then contain your secret key. So what we have is an actual script to start up Searxng using an environmental variable. So what this means is Searxng is going to be equal to the Searxng secret environmental variable that we will use in the startup script. What we have down here is user 1100, and what that is actually my ID. So you can see here UID 1000, GID 100, and the reason we need to specify that is because otherwise what happens is when you start up Searxng, it will actually change the permissions on all the files to the permissions that are in the podman group, and what that will mean is that you won't be able to edit them without sudo or doas. So what this does is this keeps the permissions of your user ID. So you will need to check your user ID by running the ID command and changing these. Typically on Linux systems, this will be the default GID and UID for the first account on the system. In that case, you should be fine and not need to change them, but you will need to change the volumes path here to match your own. The other important thing to note here is we have read-write, which is essential for Podman and Searxng to actually be able to read the configuration files. We have these other options, cap drop, cap add. What we have down here is a network. So this creates a special network called Searxng for networking. And this will actually create the Searxng config volume and the val key data2 volume as well. So that's the compose.yaml file that will be used with the podman compose up-d command line switch. But as I said, we're not actually going to be using that directly. We're going to be using a script. The next thing is the limiter.toml file, and this is I'm not exactly sure what the limiter is, but there is an option we need to change in the settings to set the limiter to false so that we can use it with OpenWebUI. So what I'm going to do is next to take you through the Searxng startup script. So this is how we start up Searxng. So you will need OpenSSL installed on your system for this to work. And as you can see here, we have a secret key variable which is equal to OpenSSL rand hex 32. And what this will do is this will create a random 32-byte hex secret key. And what we're doing down here is we're actually setting Searxng secret, which was that variable I showed you in the previous file, equal to the secret key. Then we start up podman, then we run podman compose up-d. And what this does is this allows you to put your settings file on GitHub without having the secret key inside it. So this is a big advantage. So the next thing here is we've actually got the settings.yaml file. So let me set this. First option, use default settings true. So this will actually set Searxng to use the default settings. So if I come across to the preferences here, for example, and go to engines, these are just all the default engines that are enabled. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is actually change this to false. So That's something I should actually do, because otherwise what happens is you can enable all these different search engines and restart your system, and you'll find that these have actually been reset to the default options. So you're going to want to change the use default settings from the default of true, which I should probably do. And next, this is the secret key that I was mentioning. So you can see here it's actually empty. And what you'll find is in the documentation, it will actually specify, use this command with sed and OpenSSL to edit the file and create a secret key and add it into this section here. But as I said, that will mean your secret key is in the file and you really wouldn't want to upload that to GitHub. Now this section here, limiter false, this is essential so that Searxng can actually work with Open Web UI, which I'll show you in another video. So we have the image proxy equals true. So this actually, I'm not entirely sure what that does, but that will allow you to do neat stuff like, as I said, with Searxng, it gives you direct links to all the images. And what I can actually do, if I come across and let's search for St. Paul's, London. Oops, I should spell that correctly. London. Okay, I'm just going to show you a little tip. Okay, so give it a second. Okay, and you can see it's pulling all these images in here. And so we scroll down, it's loading them all up here. And there's a reason I'm waiting for these to all download, which I'll show you in a second. So the advantage of the Searxng image search is you have direct links. So if I right click on this, when I click on it, it's going to open up in the sidebar. But if I open a new tab, you see it gives me a direct link to the image. So this, you can see here, this is a direct link to the image, which you typically don't get on other search engines. Now, what you can actually do, as well as coming through and actually clicking all the images and downloading them one by one, providing obviously they're in the public domain. But what you can do is if you run Control or Super key S, it's going to be Control or Command S on the Mac. In Firefox, what you have is this option down here. You should see come across. Web page complete, web page HTML only, text, all files. If you select web page complete and save, so it's going to save to my downloads folder. Okay, you can see here, just coming across. Just give it a second. So what it's actually doing is if I come across to my downloads folder, you'll see I have this Searxng images HTML. If I click that, this is a local full version of that web page, and you can click on all these images and they will open up. But if I come across here, you will see we've got the Searxng HTML page, but also Searxng files, which is a list of all the files. So this is all of the images. Some are bigger, some are smaller. See if I can find a big one. And you'll see they're all prefixed with image proxy. It should actually, there we go. So it's actually bringing in the full size image there. So that is how you can actually grab all the images from the search results. So let me just close some of these extra tabs here. So that's a nice thing about the images search functionality. And as I said, these will be all being pulled in from the different search engines in the preferences for the images category. These are all these sort of default things like instance, privacy policy. So this is how you can actually disable some of the options that come up at the bottom of the page, like privacy policy, donation, contact us, all that kind of stuff. We've got safe search off. You've got autocomplete. You don't want to enable the favicons because it actually slows stuff down to pull in all the favicons. Default languages, capture, and this part down here, the formats, HTML, CSV, JSON, and RSS. And if I come back here, you see we have the download results here. So obviously HTML is the actual page, and then we've got CSV, JSON, RSS. So that's how you enable the different formats that you can download. And as I said, the JSON option is required for Open Web UI. And then what we have here is the categories as tabs. And these are pretty much the default ones apart from music, which I just removed because I don't really use it. So we have general, images, video, news, IT files, map, social media, and those correspond to these tabs. And the order that those appear in your file determines how the tabs appear in the Searxng interface. So that's pretty much it, really. So when we want to start up Searxng, you'll see we have the 4 files here. So what I would do is I'd run Searxng start, and that runs this script that I showed you to create the secret key and then start up podman compose. And then to bring this down, we would run podman compose down, and that will bring the container down. So that's pretty much it. I'll put links to all this, and you should just be able to use these files. But as I said, let me have a look at the compose. In the compose.yaml file, the one thing you're going to need to change is the volumes here. So you're going to need to change this to the full path before the colon to where the Searxng directory of all those files is. You don't want to, you're also going to want to check your ID. So as I said, this is the full path to the directory with the files, but you're going to want to run ID and check your UID and your GID. And if they don't match the settings in this file, you're going to want to change them. But that's about it. You're not going to need to change anything else. But you probably will want to change the settings here, which I will actually do. So what I'm going to do now is actually, I'll bring this down, change the file, and restart it. So be a good way to show you how this works. So I'm going to run podman compose down. Okay, bring everything down. I'm going to change this to false. So this will not use the default settings anymore. So that will allow me to change the search engines that are used by default in the preferences. So I'm now going to run Searxng start. Bang. I'll come back here. Oh, when we've got an internal server error. Great. So maybe we don't want to change that from true. So there must be something. All right, let's put that back to true. So there must be something else funny going on. But, you know, this is a demo. It's always good to see stuff that doesn't work. But let's bring that down again. Podman compose down. And if I check I haven't broken it completely. So that's something I have to look into. Searxng start. Should now start again. Yeah. But basically, what I was saying is when you change some of these enable some of these extra search options with the use default settings true, they actually get reset. So there must be something else at play when you change this to false that's actually causing that internal server error. But, good to find out what it is. So, that's something to put on my to-do list. So that's one issue that will need to be resolved is have to figure out how you can set that to false so that you can enable all these extra search engines, because as I say, what will happen is I could show you this. Let me come across here. If so if I enable the nixos wiki, save that, podman compose down, Searxng start, and come back to the preferences, engines, IT, and we look for you can see it's been reset. So that's one issue that I need to figure out. And I said, I believe that's use default settings true. Let's have a look at the documentation. So Searxng. And what we want to do is have a look for the use default settings. Okay, documentation. Engines. I think you can actually specify the engines that you want in the settings, perhaps. I thought there was a section. I'll have to RTFM documentation. I think there may be a way you can actually specify all the search engines you want in the settings file. So I said that's one thing that needs to be resolved, is to figure out how to enable search engines that aren't enabled by default, as it were. So as I said, it's really good. So what I can do is I can do Napoleon Wilson. Okay, so you can see here, that's my GitHub repository, code library, YouTube channel. If I come across to videos. So what we can see here, this is how the videos look. And said what you can also do is you can download a CSV file. So you can see here, this is actually showing the title, URL, content, host, engine, score, and type. So this is a really nice way of actually being able to download. That's not me. I'm not that old. But this is a nice way to actually be able to download a CSV file of all the URLs for the different videos, that kind of thing. Don't know what it's come up with, images. Yeah, so Napoleon Wilson is actually a character in the 1976 film by John Carpenter, Assault on Precinct 13. And if you haven't seen it, well worth a watch. You may know of John Carpenter from other films such as Halloween, The Thing, Prince of Darkness, Big Trouble in Little China. Prince of Darkness is another really good one with Donald Pleasance, and actually Alice Cooper plays a homeless guy in it. Just a completely irrelevant fact. But that's why, that's where my username comes from, Napoleon Wilson. So you got all these different tabs that you can search through. Most of them, apart from the images, will give you the option to download the results as a CSV. You got JSON, you got RSS, and as I said, JSON is enabled here because it's used with Open Web UI, and that is a front end for local LLMs like running with a llama. So you can actually set up Open Web UI to use Searxng as a search engine. And the advantage of that is the other options in Open Web UI for search actually require an API key. So if you want to use something like Bing or Google or DuckDuckGo, they all require an API key, and some of them are paid. And using Searxng means you can do it for free, which is great. So hopefully that will get you started. And as I said, basically we just have the 4 files. So we've got 4 files: compose.yaml, limiter.toml, the Searxng start script, and the settings.yaml. So the compose.yaml, as I said, is the file that is used with Podman. So this is how it pulls down all the containers and sets everything up. The limiter, I'm not sure exactly what that's for. We've got the startup script, and we've got the settings.yaml YML file, which is used to configure the Searxng options. And as I said, I need to figure out how you can actually change the default settings to true, from true to false, without breaking the entire thing, so that you can use additional search engines. So if you know how to do that or what I'm missing, leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll have to read up on the documentation to figure out how to enable the different search engines. And I said, I think you may be able to specify them in the configuration file, but it's easier to use the UI. So that'll be something to put on the to-do list. So that's Searxng. There we go. This is the GitHub page, as you can see here, Searxng install guide. So you can actually do this several ways, but using Podman is a nice way because it keeps everything in one place, and you don't have any conflicts with different versions of software required. As I said, I'm doing this on nixos. There is actually, I believe, a way you can actually run a Searxng service, but I prefer to do it using Podman because it's a bit easier. So hopefully that will get you set up for Searxng so that you have your own private search engine running locally without, if I come across to like Bing, for example, nixos. Typically, if you have a look down here at the screen down here, you can see the amount of extra stuff that is actually put in for these Bing redirects. Yeah, so you can't copy you don't get a direct URL. Yeah, you get all that crap. And as I said, EDG, nixos. The issue with DuckDuckGo is that there's no pagination. The one thing I should show you is actually how you get this to, how you add this as a option in Firefox. I thought you actually clicked in one of these sections. You'll see it's coming up with Searxng. If I remove that, cost to search, if I remove Searxng, okay, remove and come back across here. I thought it was, there we go. Yeah. So now I've removed it. When I right click in the search here, you'll see add Searxng. What I wanted to mention is this is set in a YAML file. Yeah. So this is controlled by the Searxng base URL in the compose.yaml. You can see it's set to localhost 8080. now when I do add Searxng and come back across to the settings, we've got Searxng, I can just move that up here. I can add a keyword, SX, for example. You can then set that as your default search engine, but I think there might be, I can't remember if there was actually an issue with running it from the URL bar here. So let's try. Oh, no, it's working. There we go. So as you can see, we've now got Searxng set as the default search engine in Firefox, and it's working with the URL bar up here. So I typically spit you've got the URL bar. I can't remember what that one's called. But that's how you can actually set it as your default. So if I come across the settings, search. So what we did was we right clicked, and when we removed it, we had the option to add it as a search engine. Then comes up in this section, search. You can add a little keyword up here. And then in this section, what you can do is you can set the default engine to Searxng, and that will set it as the default search engine. As you can see here, it's now searching. So that's a nice touch here. And you can see here, it's actually running on localhost, but it's also accessible via my LAN IP as well. Just one thing to mention, if you're on nixos, okay, here. In my configuration.nix, what you'll see here is networking firewall allowed TCP ports. And what you'll see here is 8080. And that corresponds to the port used by Searxng. And you may be wondering why you actually need to open the port, even though it's just running locally and you're not providing access to it. If you don't have the port open, you won't be able to actually access the container running on that port. So you need the port open for 8080. That may differ on different systems, on different versions of Linux, but if you're actually having an issue with the container being started, but then you're not actually being able to access it in the browser, that might be the issue. So if that's the case, run podman compose down to bring it down, open the port if you're using IP tables or something like UFW. You can use GUFW, which is a GUI for UFW, which I think is the default firewall on things like Ubuntu and Debian. You may need to just reboot just in case, and then try it again, and that should resolve the issue. So that's all for now. I'll put links to all this under the video, and as I said, I'll try and figure out what the issue is with not being able to actually change the search engines from the default restore using the default settings true. So there must be something I'm missing there. So if you know what it is, leave a comment, and that'd help people out. So have a look through all the documentation. As I said, I put links to all this, so that should hopefully get you started and get you set up with Podman running Searxng. As I said, I showed you how to set up Podman on nixos in a previous video. If you're on a different system, Debian, Ubuntu, or whatever, Podman, just Podman, Ubuntu, just do a simple search. This will tell you how to set it up on Mac and Windows, and on sort of different versions of Linux, Arch, Alpine, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, etc. So do a little search on how to get Podman set up first of all, get it working. You can run it with a Hello World script to make sure it's working, and then just use those configuration files that I'll link to. and you should be able to get Searxng set up. Obviously, the first time you run the Searxng start script, it's actually going to pull down all the containers, everything, which may take a little while depending on your internet speed. But after you've done that, it'll be good to go. And as I said, you just need to run it with Searxng start and then podman compose down to pull to stop the container. You can tweak all the interface. You can change the ordered tabs, what comes up in here. But as I said, need to figure out what the issue is with changing the use default settings from true to false to enabling the other search engines. But to be honest, most of the good ones are actually enabled, and the ones that are disabled tend to be ones that kind of maybe have a poorer score down here. So what you'll see is response time, max time, reliability. So the ones that are disabled tend to be ones that actually perhaps have issues with them either being slow to start or not being as reliable. So that's all for now. I hope that helps out.